Rain fell gently across downtown Chicago, turning the sidewalks into mirrors of silver and gold beneath the streetlights. Emily Carter locked the front door of Lincoln Elementary nearly an hour after the last student had gone home. The classroom behind her was quiet now. Colorful drawings covered the walls. Tiny paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling. A stack of essays waited to be graded inside her canvas tote bag. It had been another ordinary Thursday. Emily liked ordinary. After everything life had taken from her, ordinary felt like a gift. She walked 3 blocks to a modest brick apartment building she had called home for 6 years. The elevator still groaned between floors. Mrs. Alvarez from apartment 4B still watered flowers in the hallway every evening. Nothing ever changed. Emily preferred it that way. Inside her apartment, she set the kettle on the stove before opening a weathered wooden box tucked away on the highest shelf of her bookcase. Inside were dozens of neatly tied bundles of handwritten letters. Every envelope was addressed to the same name, Daniel Reed. She smiled faintly. 7 years had passed since she had volunteered for a prison correspondence program designed to help inmates improve their reading and writing skills. The program matched volunteers with prisoners serving long sentences. Emily had never met Daniel. She didn't know what crime he had committed. The rules forbade sharing photographs or personal addresses. Only letters. At first, the exchanges had been awkward. He answered every question with 1 or 2 sentences. His handwriting was rigid. His words were cautious. But over time, the letters changed. He wrote about books, about sunsets he could no longer see, about guilt, about regret, about wondering whether someone who had made terrible choices still deserved forgiveness. Emily never judged him. She simply wrote back, sometimes about her students, sometimes about the stray cat that waited outside the school every morning, sometimes about nothing important at all. One letter had stayed with her more than any other. What if someone became a monster because the world never gave him another choice? Emily had thought about that question for days before answering. Her reply had been simple. The choices behind us explain who we were. The choices in front of us decide who we become. Months later, Daniel responded with only 1 sentence. Thank you for reminding me that I still have tomorrow. She never realized those words would become the most valuable thing she ever gave another human being. Nearly 2,000 miles away, 7 years earlier, a prison transport bus rolled through layers of razor wire beneath a gray winter sky. Inside, inmate Daniel Reed kept his eyes fixed on the steel floor. Chains circled his wrists. His orange prison uniform hid the scars crossing his ribs. No one on that bus knew his real name. No one knew he had entered prison willingly. Daniel Reed did not exist. His real identity had disappeared years earlier, buried beneath classified files, protected by agencies that would deny he had ever lived. His real name was Damian Rossi. At 29, Damian had inherited one of America's most powerful criminal organizations after his father's assassination. Rather than immediately claiming power, he vanished. Rumors spread that he had fled the country. Others believed rival families had killed him. Only 3 people knew the truth. Damian had surrendered himself under a false identity to infiltrate the prison where the men responsible for his father's murder controlled their operations. For 7 years, he lived among killers, building trust, collecting names, waiting, never allowing himself to feel anything beyond survival. Until one afternoon, a prison counselor handed him an envelope. "You've been assigned a volunteer pen pal." Damian almost laughed. He had spent years pretending to be someone else. The last thing he needed was another lie. He nearly threw the letter away unopened. Instead, he unfolded it. The papers smelled faintly of lavender. The handwriting was careful and warm. "Dear Daniel, my name is Emily. I don't know your story, and I won't pretend to. I only hope this letter reminds you that someone outside those walls believes every person deserves to be heard." For reasons he couldn't explain, he read the letter 3 times. Back in the present, Emily closed the wooden box after rereading one of the old letters. She had stopped writing nearly 6 months earlier. The prison program informed volunteers that Daniel Reed had been transferred to another federal facility. No forwarding address was provided. She hoped he was alive. She hoped he had found peace. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Emily switched off the kitchen light and prepared for bed. She never noticed the black SUV parked across the street. Its headlights remained off. Inside sat 3 men wearing dark suits. One lowered a pair of binoculars. "Sir, she's home," a deep voice answered from the darkness of the back seat. "I know." The speaker slowly untied a faded blue ribbon wrapped around dozens of old letters. His thumb brushed across Emily's handwriting with surprising gentleness. 7 years, thousands of miles, hundreds of letters. Not once had he forgotten the woman who had unknowingly kept him alive. He looked toward the apartment window, glowing softly against the rain. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "I stop hiding." The SUV disappeared into the night. Emily never knew that by sunrise, every ordinary part of her life would be gone forever. Emily barely slept. The image of the black SUV parked across the street lingered in her mind, though she had never actually seen it. Something felt different when she woke. Not dangerous, just unsettling. She dressed for work as she always did, choosing a cream-colored sweater beneath a navy coat. Before gathering the stack of math quizzes, she planned to return to her third-grade class. Outside, the November air carried the scent of rain. Children laughed as parents hurried them toward the school entrance. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. Yet, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that invisible eyes were following her. Across the street, inside a black Escalade, Damian Rossi watched her through lightly tinted glass. 7 years. 7 years of imagining what this moment would feel like. He had rehearsed countless conversations while sitting inside a concrete prison cell. None of them prepared him for reality. She looked exactly as he remembered, and completely different. Older, more confident. The quiet kindness in her eyes hadn't changed. Neither had the way she smiled at every child who passed through the school gates. Marco, Damian's longtime security chief, lowered a tablet onto the seat. "The perimeter is clean." Damian nodded. "No contact." Marco looked surprised. "You've waited 7 years. I can wait one more day." He continued watching Emily disappear inside the school. "I promised myself, the first time she saw me, it wouldn't be because she was afraid." At 11 o'clock that morning, Emily received an unexpected visitor. The principal knocked gently on her classroom door. "Emily, a gentleman would like a moment of your time." She frowned. "I don't know anyone coming today." Outside the office stood an elderly man wearing a gray suit. He held a small cardboard box tied with faded blue ribbon. "My name is Arthur Lewis. I worked for the volunteer correspondence program." Emily smiled politely. "It's been years." Arthur's expression softened. "I'm retiring. I've spent the last month organizing old files." He handed her the box. "These belong to you." Emily looked confused. "I thought they destroyed correspondence records." "They were supposed to." He hesitated. "But someone requested copies." Her heartbeat slowed. "Who?" Arthur shook his head. "I don't know. He paid to preserve every letter." Emily stared at the ribbon. The handwriting on the first envelope belonged to her, but underneath, another envelope rested she had never seen before. It carried Daniel's name, addressed to her, never delivered. Arthur lowered his voice. "Some letters never reached either of you." Before Emily could ask another question, Arthur quietly walked away. That evening, she hurried home. Curiosity overcame exhaustion. She untied the ribbon and carefully opened the first missing letter. The date made her stomach tighten. It had been written almost 5 years earlier. "Dear Emily, today, another inmate asked me why someone like you still writes to someone like me. I told him I don't know. Maybe because you've never asked what I did. Maybe because you've never treated me like the worst thing I've ever done. There are things I wish I could tell you, but if I ever survive this place, I hope I'll earn the chance to tell you in person." Emily frowned. She had never received it. Beneath it lay another, and another, nearly 20 letters, each one filled with thoughts she had never been allowed to read. One sentence appeared over and over. "Someone is reading our letters." Emily slowly lowered the paper. Her apartment suddenly felt much smaller. Miles away, inside the penthouse of the Rossi Tower, overlooking Chicago, Damian stood before floor-to-ceiling windows. The city glittered beneath him. Marco entered quietly. "We found Arthur. He kept his promise." Damian didn't turn. "Did she receive them?" "Yes." Silence. Marco studied the bundle of original letters Damian still kept inside a wooden case. "You never answered my question." Damian finally looked at him. "Which one? Why her?" There were hundreds of volunteers. Damian picked up the very first letter Emily had written. The paper had yellowed with age. "When I entered prison, I had already decided I wasn't coming back." Marco remained silent. Damian continued. "Then this stranger wrote to a man everyone else had forgotten." He smiled faintly. "She never asked for anything. She never judged me. She simply believed I could become someone better." His voice lowered. "And for 7 years, I tried not to disappoint someone I'd never met." At almost the same moment, across the city, a man wearing leather gloves placed photographs across a conference table. Every image showed Emily leaving school, buying groceries, walking home, reading in a cafe. Another man stepped from the shadows. His silver hair framed a face untouched by mercy. Vittorio Morelli, leader of the Morelli Syndicate. He studied the photographs one by one. "So, the great Damian Rossi finally has a weakness." One of his men nodded. "Our people intercepted 23 letters over the years. We changed enough to keep them apart." Vittorio smiled. "And still, They found each other. He reached for Emily's latest photograph. Bring her to me. Alive? Vittorio looked toward the city lights. For now, if Damian wants her, I want to know why. Emily spent the evening reading every missing letter. Some were hopeful, some painfully lonely. Others carried a quiet sadness she had never noticed before. Near the bottom of the box rested the final envelope. Unlike the others, it had never been opened. The handwriting trembled slightly. She unfolded it carefully. Dear Emily, if this letter reaches you, then I finally survived. Me real name isn't Daniel. Her breath caught. The next line had been torn away. The remaining page ended abruptly. One day, I'll stand at your door. When that happens, please don't be afraid of the man everyone else fears. Emily stared at the unfinished sentence. A sudden knock echoed through her apartment. 3 slow knocks. She froze. Another knock. Careful, patient. She walked toward the door, her heart pounding louder with every step. Looking through the peephole, she saw only one man standing beneath the hallway light. Tall, dark overcoat, rain dripping from his shoulders. No bodyguards, no weapon in sight. Only a weathered bundle of letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. When Emily slowly opened the door, the stranger lifted his eyes to hers. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, in the same calm voice she had imagined for 7 years, he said, Hello, Emily. My name is Damian Rossi, and I've spent 7 years trying to find the right way to thank you. Before Emily could answer, the hallway windows exploded inward. Gunfire shattered the silence. Someone had found them. The first bullet shattered the apartment window behind Emily. Glass exploded across the hardwood floor. Damian moved before she could even scream. He caught her around the waist and pulled her backward into the hallway, just as another burst of gunfire tore through the doorway she had been standing in seconds earlier. Stay behind me, he ordered. His voice remained calm, controlled, the same calm Emily had imagined while reading hundreds of handwritten letters. Only now, she realized the gentleman from those pages and the feared Mafia boss standing before her were somehow the same person. 2 men, 1 soul. 3 more shots echoed through the building. Residents screamed. Apartment doors slammed shut. Damian reached beneath his overcoat and drew a compact black pistol. Emily stared at him. You have a gun. He looked at her only briefly. I hoped you'd never have to see this part of my life. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairwell. Marco appeared first, followed by 4 members of Damian's security team. The west entrance is compromised. Snipers across the street. Damian nodded. The garage? Blocked. Emily's heart raced. What is happening? No one answered. Outside, engines roared. More black SUVs surrounded the apartment building. Some belonged to Damian. Others did not. Marco glanced through the shattered window. The Morelli Syndicate. They got here faster than we expected. Damian's jaw tightened. They've been watching her. 2 blocks away, Vittorio Morelli stood beneath an umbrella on the rooftop of an abandoned office building. Through a rifle scope, one of his men tracked movement inside Emily's apartment. They're escaping. Vittorio smiled faintly. Good. The sniper frowned. We're letting them go? I never wanted the girl. He lowered the binoculars. I wanted Damian to protect her. Only then would he make mistakes. Only then would emotion replace calculation. For 7 years, Damian Rossi had been impossible to manipulate. Everyone feared him because he never allowed anyone close enough to become leverage. Until now, inside the apartment building, Damian guided Emily toward the emergency stairwell. She struggled to understand anything happening around her. Those men, they're trying to kill me? They're trying to reach me. They'll use you to do it. But why? Damian stopped. For the first time since the shooting began, he faced her completely. Because they know I won't leave without you. Emily stared into his steel gray eyes. There was no hesitation, no calculation, only certainty. She remembered one sentence from a letter written years ago. If I ever survive this place, I hope I'll earn the chance to protect someone instead of hurting them. The words suddenly carried an entirely different meaning. The convoy sped through rain-soaked Chicago streets. Emily sat in the back seat beside Damian. Neither spoke for several minutes. Sirens echoed somewhere behind them. The city blurred past. Finally, she whispered, "Were any of your letters real?" Damian looked out the window. Every word. But your name. No, my name wasn't. The rest was. She folded her hands tightly. You said, prison changed you. It did. You said you regretted your past. I do. You said someone outside those walls reminded you that tomorrow still mattered. He slowly turned toward her. You. Silence filled the vehicle. Emily searched his face for deception. She found only exhaustion. Years of it. I never lied about how your letters made me feel. I lied only about who was reading them. 40 minutes later, the convoy entered an underground parking structure beneath an old riverside hotel. The elevator required 3 separate security codes. When the doors finally opened, Emily stepped into a private residence, unlike anything she had ever imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. Original paintings hung beside marble walls. A grand piano occupied one corner of the room. The penthouse felt less like a criminal headquarters and more like an elegant museum. Emily quietly removed her rain-soaked coat. You live here? Damian nodded. When I'm forced to. You don't like it? It echoes. She almost smiled. That's an unusual complaint. It reminds me how empty it is. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt strangely familiar, just like the pauses between paragraphs in his letters. Marco interrupted them. We searched your apartment. Emily looked up immediately. My letters? They're gone. Her expression fell. The wooden box? Marco nodded. So are your journals. Damian's eyes narrowed. They weren't after Emily. They were after the correspondence. Emily frowned. Why would anyone steal old letters? Damian walked toward a large wooden desk. He opened a hidden drawer. Inside rested dozens of envelopes identical to hers. Every letter Emily had ever written, perfectly preserved. You kept all of them? I read some more than 100 times. She looked at the carefully organized bundles, each year tied separately with different colored ribbon. You remembered. I remembered everything. Emily gently touched one envelope. They stole mine. Damian's expression darkened, which means someone wanted to know exactly what we never received. Later that evening, Emily stood alone on the penthouse balcony, overlooking the river. Rain had finally stopped. The city lights shimmered beneath the clouds. She heard footsteps behind her. Damian approached, carrying 2 cups of tea. I remembered. You never liked coffee after sunset. Emily looked surprised. I only mentioned that once. You mentioned it in your 18th letter. She accepted the cup. You really do remember everything. He didn't answer, because remembering had never been difficult. For 7 years, her letters had become the only calendar he trusted, the only proof the world outside prison still contained kindness. Emily stared across the skyline. I spent years imagining what you'd look like, and you don't look like the man I imagined. No, you look lonelier. The words struck harder than any bullet. Damian looked away. No one had ever described him so accurately. At the same moment, across the city, a young woman, wearing a federal investigator's badge, entered a secure evidence room. She unlocked a metal cabinet labeled Operation Black Veil. Inside rested hundreds of intercepted letters. Every letter Emily had never received. Every reply Damian had never seen. She removed one sealed envelope marked with red ink. Do not release. Inside was a handwritten confession, one that neither Emily nor Damian had ever read. The final paragraph made her blood run cold. If anything happens to me, don't trust the Bureau. Someone inside already knows my real identity. The investigator whispered to herself, "Oh me God." Before she could read another line, the lights went out. A single gunshot echoed through the archive. Darkness swallowed the room, and somewhere in the shadows, someone walked away, carrying the last letter Damian Rossi had ever written. The lights inside Rossi Tower never went completely dark. Within seconds, backup generators restored a soft amber glow across the penthouse. Yet, the silence felt heavier than before. Emily couldn't stop thinking about the final words Damian had spoken. I remembered everything. She believed him, not because he said it, because she had seen the letters. Every envelope carefully preserved, every crease protected, every page read so many times the paper had become soft around the edges. No one kept memories like that for convenience, only for survival. Damian stood alone in his private office overlooking Lake Michigan. Marco entered quietly. The Federal Archive was hit. Damian didn't look surprised. I expected it. They stole one file. Only one? Marco nodded. The last letter. Damian slowly closed his eyes. So they finally know. Marco hesitated. You think Morelli has it? No. Worse. They're working with someone inside the Bureau. Emily couldn't sleep. The guest bedroom overlooked the city skyline. Luxury surrounded her. Silk sheets, fireplace, fresh flowers. Yet, she had never felt further from home. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. It's Damian. May I come in? She opened the door. He stood holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. Exactly as Daniel had once written, he liked making it during sleepless nights. I couldn't sleep either, he admitted. Emily stepped aside. For several minutes, they simply sat near the fireplace. No bodyguards. No gunfire. No pretending. Only 2 strangers connected by hundreds of conversations that had happened years apart. Finally, Emily broke the silence. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? Damian stared into the flames. Because if you knew who I was, you would have stopped writing. You don't know that. I do. She shook her head. No. You assumed. His jaw tightened. I've spent my entire life watching people disappear after learning my name. Emily looked at him carefully. You never gave me the chance to decide. For the first time in years, Damian had no answer. The next morning, Emily wandered through Damian's private library. Thousands of books filled floor-to-ceiling shelves. History, philosophy, poetry, classics. Nothing matched the image the world painted of America's most feared mafia boss. She noticed one shelf filled entirely with novels she had recommended in her letters. She slowly pulled one free. Inside the cover, a folded piece of paper slipped onto the floor. It wasn't a letter. It was a drawing, a child's drawing. Two stick figures beneath a tree. One was labeled Emily, the other Danielle. Her eyes widened. On the back was a note. Mrs. Carter, I hope your prison friend gets to come home someday. Noah, age 8. Emily remembered immediately. One of her students had insisted on drawing a picture for Daniel years earlier. She had mailed it with one of her letters. Tears formed in her eyes. You kept this too. You kept everything. Meanwhile, across the city, inside a private estate hidden behind iron gates, Vittorio Morelli examined the stolen letter. The paper looked ordinary. Its words did not. If you're reading this, then someone betrayed us. Emily, there is one person I never told you about. My younger sister, Isabella. If anything happens to me, Finhea. Vittorio smiled slowly. So, you have a sister. His advisor frowned. Our people searched years ago. We never found her. Vittorio folded the letter carefully. We weren't looking for the right person. 3 hours later, Damian's phone rang. He answered immediately. Marco's voice sounded unusually tense. We have a problem. What happened? A woman was taken this morning. Damian frowned. Who? Marco hesitated. Your sister. The room went completely still. Emily watched Damian's expression change. For the first time, real fear appeared in his eyes. Not anger, fear. Emily stepped closer. What happened? Damian lowered the phone slowly. I haven't seen Isabella in 15 years. I hid her under another identity. No one was supposed to know she existed. He looked toward the rain falling outside. They found her. Emily placed a hand on his arm. What can I do? Damian looked at her. You can stay here. I'm not asking that. I know. I'm asking how I can help. He almost smiled. Even now, she still chose compassion over fear, exactly as she always had. Late that afternoon, the security system alerted everyone inside the penthouse. An envelope had been delivered. No fingerprints, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Isabella sat tied to a chair inside what appeared to be an abandoned church. Behind the photograph, only one sentence. Bring Emily Carter. Come alone. Marco immediately shook his head. It's a trap. Damian agreed. Obviously, Emily looked between them. They don't want me. They want you. Damian picked up the photograph. No, they already have the only thing they wanted. My weakness. He looked directly into Emily's eyes, and they're counting on me proving them right. That evening, Emily quietly entered the study while Damian spoke with his captains downstairs. She couldn't stop thinking about Isabella, about the years Damian had spent protecting everyone except himself. On his desk lay the old wooden box containing every letter she had ever written. She gently opened it. At the very bottom, hidden beneath hundreds of envelopes, she found something unexpected. A sealed letter addressed in Damian's handwriting. Not to Daniel, not to Emily, simply, to the woman I hope I'll someday deserve. Emily stared at it for several seconds. She knew she shouldn't read it. She closed the box again, without opening the envelope. Some truths, she realized, needed to be given, not stolen. Behind her, Damian quietly entered the room. You didn't read it. Emily turned. It wasn't mine. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Damian walked toward her, stopping only inches away, close enough that she could hear his heartbeat, close enough to remember every lonely sentence he'd ever written. He slowly reached toward her face. His fingers almost brushed a loose strand of hair. Then he stopped, just before touching her. His hand fell back to his side. I've imagined meeting you for 7 years. His voice was barely above a whisper. I promised myself the first thing I'd give you wouldn't be fear. Emily looked into his eyes. And what did you want to give me instead? Before he could answer, every light inside Rossi Tower suddenly went black. A violent explosion shook the entire building. The windows shattered outward. Fire alarms screamed. Marco's voice echoed through the emergency speakers. They're inside. Everyone move. Damian instinctively pulled Emily against his chest as another explosion tore through the lower floors. The war had finally reached his home. The explosion ripped through the lower floors of Rossi Tower like rolling thunder. Fire alarms screamed. Glass rained across the marble lobby. Smoke climbed the stairwells as Damian instinctively wrapped one arm around Emily, pulling her behind a concrete support column before another burst of gunfire echoed through the darkness. They're here, Marco shouted through the radio. Morelli's soldiers have breached the west entrance. Damian's expression hardened instantly. The emergency tunnel. Marco nodded. It's already compromised. For a single heartbeat, Damian stood perfectly still. Then he made his decision. Get Emily out. I'm staying. Emily grabbed his arm. No, you'll be killed. He looked at her with surprising calm. If they want anyone tonight, they want me. She shook her head. I'm not leaving you. Their eyes locked. For the first time since they had met face to face, neither the Mafia Boss nor the schoolteacher spoke. The silence carried 7 years of conversations, 7 years of trust, 7 years of letters that had somehow survived even when the people writing them had nearly lost themselves. Meanwhile, several miles away, inside the abandoned church shown in the photograph, Isabella Rossi sat bound to a wooden chair beneath shattered stained glass windows. She had spent 15 years living under another identity. She barely remembered her childhood. She had no idea why armed men suddenly dragged her from her home that morning. The church doors creaked open. Vittorio Morelli entered slowly. You look just like your father. Isabella glared at him. I don't know who you are. No. He smiled coldly. But your brother does. Back at Rossi Tower, Damian's convoy tore through burning barricades toward the old church on the city's outskirts. Emily refused to stay behind. Despite every protest from Marco and the security team, she climbed into Damian's armored SUV. You can't stop me. Damian looked at her. You've spent 7 years risking your life for strangers. You don't get to tell me compassion has limits. A faint smile touched his face. You really are exactly who I imagined. The storm reached its peak as they arrived. Lightning illuminated the abandoned church overlooking Lake Michigan. Black SUVs surrounded the building. Snipers occupied the bell tower. Morelli soldiers waited behind broken stone walls. Damian stepped from the vehicle first. He carried no rifle, only the same pistol he had used to protect Emily the night they met. Emily remained beside him, not behind him, beside him, inside the church. Vittorio applauded slowly. I wondered how long it would take. Damian's voice remained steady. Let my sister go. You first. Vittorio held up a worn bundle tied with faded blue ribbon. Emily gasped. Their letters. Every missing letter. Every stolen confession. Every word someone had hidden for 7 years. Vittorio tossed them onto the altar. Do you know what these taught me? He looked toward Emily. You were never Damian's weakness. You were the reason he remembered he was human. He laughed softly. So tonight, I'm going to take that away. Gunfire erupted. The church exploded into chaos. Damian immediately pulled Emily behind a fallen marble pillar. Marco and his team exchanged fire with Morelli's soldiers as stained glass shattered overhead. Smoke filled the sanctuary. Bullets tore through ancient wooden pews. Emily spotted Isabella still tied near the altar. Without thinking, she ran. Emily, Damian shouted, but she was already moving. Ignoring the gunfire, ignoring the chaos, she reached Isabella and cut the ropes binding her wrists with a broken piece of stained glass. Can you run? Isabella nodded. Before they could move, a gun clicked behind them. Vittorio. He smiled as he aimed directly at Emily. I knew you'd choose someone else's life over your own. Damian stepped out from cover. Take me instead. Vittorio laughed. You'd surrender for her, for both of them. Without hesitation, Damian slowly placed his pistol on the floor, raised his hands, walked forward. Emily stared at him in disbelief. You can't. He looked at her. His voice was quiet. 7 years ago, you taught me something. She felt tears fill her eyes. What? That tomorrow only matters if someone you love gets to see it. Before Vittorio could pull the trigger, a single gunshot echoed through the church. Then, another. Vittorio staggered backward. A crimson stain spread across his chest. Everyone turned. Marco stood at the rear entrance, with federal tactical agents flooding into the church. Earlier that night, the FBI investigator who had survived the archive attack had finally decoded Damian's final intercepted letter. It contained every name, every undercover contact, every corrupt official, and one emergency authorization code Damian had hidden years earlier. The entire Morelli operation collapsed within minutes. As agents surrounded the church, Vittorio fell against the altar. His eyes never left Damian. You became everything your father wanted. With those words, he closed his eyes forever. 3 months later, spring returned to Chicago. Lincoln Elementary buzzed with children racing through freshly planted gardens. Emily stood in her classroom, exactly where her students remembered her. Life felt ordinary again. She smiled every time she heard children laughing outside her window. One afternoon, the classroom door opened quietly. A little girl stepped inside. Miss Carter? Emily smiled. Yes, my uncle wanted me to give you this. The child handed her a single envelope. Emily immediately recognized the handwriting. She laughed softly. Some things never changed. She found Damian waiting beneath the large oak tree across the street from the school. No convoy, no bodyguards, no weapons, only a navy suit and the quiet smile she had imagined for years. "You still write letters?" she asked. "I figured I'd finally deliver one myself." She opened the envelope. Inside rested only one handwritten sentence. "Dear Emily, would you let me spend the rest of my tomorrows proving you were right about second chances?" Tears blurred the page. She looked up. "You still ask questions with letters." "I've had a lot of practice." She stepped closer. "So, here's my answer." She folded the letter carefully before slipping it into her coat pocket. "You never needed to earn the chance to tell me who you really were. You only needed to knock on my door." For the first time in 7 years, she reached for his hand. This time, neither of them let go. 6 months later, they were married in a quiet ceremony inside a small lakeside chapel. There were no reporters, no mafia families, no politics, only close friends. Marco, Isabella, Emily's students, proudly carrying white flowers down the aisle. Instead of exchanging expensive gifts, Damian gave Emily the only thing that had ever truly belonged to both of them: a wooden box. Inside were every letter, including every one that had been stolen. Every missing page had finally found its way home. After the ceremony, they stood together beside the lake as the evening sun reflected across the water. Emily leaned her head against Damian's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd never written that first letter?" Damian smiled. "I do." And he looked at the old blue ribbon wrapped around the letters. "I think I would have won every war and still lost the only life that mattered." Emily squeezed his hand. The wind gently turned one of the envelopes inside the box. On the back of the very first letter she had ever written, someone had added a single sentence years later. "Not by fate, not by destiny, but by Damian himself." Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the beginning of someone's entire future. The box closed, the letters remained safe, and for the first time in either of their lives, neither of them had anything left to hide.